Okay, well, hello again, everyone. Right, lots of questions have come in. We will try our best to answer as many as possible. Okay, let's start first of all with someone has asked, should we get a CELTA or a Delta qualification? Marie-Therese, do you want to answer that one?
Well, actually, I think it's a good one for David, but really, it depends really very much on your experience, doesn't it, David?
It does, yes. I mean, CELTA is described as an initial teacher training qualification. So it gives you the basic practical skills that you need in order to teach classes effectively. However, experienced teachers in other subjects would also be advised to do the CELTA because it's obviously subject specific to English language teaching. And so teachers who've maybe got many years experience still find the CELTA quite a challenge because they're learning how to adapt their teaching skills to the specific context of English language teaching.
Yes, okay. I think also it gives a foundation, doesn't it? CELTA gives a foundation on which Delta then builds. Yep. Doing Delta without the CELTA is really quite a learning curve because you're starting from a very low point, aren't you?
Okay, well, let's follow that up then. And someone has said, for someone who's already teaching for a few years, is CELTA the right exam or the right course to take?
I think it is. I think David answered that because what it does is and actually as the candidate said on the video there, that it reinvigorates your teaching. It gives you a motivation to carry on, but also it gives you new ideas, things that perhaps you've got into bad habits and that sort of thing, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Okay. There are some questions here relating to what's called the CELTA examination. I think there isn't really a CELTA examination. There's a CELTA course which leads to a certificate.
Yes.
I think that's quite an important point. Yes. It's a continual assessment course. But linked to that, there are some questions related to the CELTA online course, and I think it's worth clearing that up. Someone's asking, how can they do teaching practice online? Well, of course, they can't. And that's the whole point. It's a blended course. The input for the course comes online. But all the teaching practice you do on the online CELTA is done face-to-face, exactly as you would do it on a face-to-face 4-week course or a part-time course.
Yeah, and perhaps I could add there that the beauty of the online CELTA is that you can, if you like, conserve all your energies for the teaching practice. So you cut down on travel costs and travel time going to the centre for every input session. You do all that from home. So you only travel to the centre when you need to do teaching practice.
Okay, one more question here from someone. I've got a PGCE, which is a postgraduate certificate in education from the UK. Do I need to do a CELTA to teach overseas? Answer?
I think yes, because PGCEs are targeted not at English language teaching specifically. They are it's a generic teacher training qualification, so it teaches you, certainly in the UK, it relates to teaching geography or English or history or and isn't subject specific to English language teaching. So I think, yes, you do. A PGCE is helpful because all of the experience that you get in the practical component of a PGCE is helpful on the CELTA course because you already have some teaching skills and classroom management skills, but you still need the subject knowledge.
Yes, indeed. Okay. And in fact, I did a PGCE. I went on after that and did a TEFL qualification.
Somebody asking here on the web about how much it costs.
Yep.
So I think the answer to that, David, is it varies, doesn't it?
It does vary. Yes, obviously it depends on where you're doing the course, which country you're in, and the cost of living. I guess an average price in the UK would be between £1,000 and £1,500. But it does vary, as I say, depending on where you are.
Okay.
Yeah. Another question here about the difference between TKT. How does TKT differ from CELTA? The answer is that TKT is an exam. So you go into a room and you answer questions on an answer sheet or question paper. There is a TKT practical component, which is one 40-minute lesson on which you're assessed. CELTA is different because it spans the period of a whole course. So it's not just one lesson or one exam. And what we look for on CELTA courses is development as a teacher. So how you develop those teaching skills over the period of a whole course. Whereas with TKT, it's a test, a snapshot, an assessment on one specific occasion. Doesn't have that developmental angle.
And when you're applying for jobs, I think most employers are interested in your performance over a period of time. So that's why the CELTA is so vital in the job market.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also it's important to say that at the end of the course, the centre issues you with a performance profile, and that becomes like your reference. So you can take that to an employer and say, okay, this is how I've done in each of these areas of my teaching.
Right. Some questions here about the certificate that you get, and does it state whether it was a full-time or a blended course? The answer is no. It just says you have a CELTA qualification. So there's no indication of the kind of course you took. But further to that, someone's asking about the quality assessment of courses and the quality assurance.
And how courses abroad are assessed, and how we maintain quality in courses overseas.
As we said in the webinar, there is a CELTA syllabus that we provide in Cambridge, and we have to approve every course that is run. So the course provider will send in the syllabus and their timetable to us and who's teaching on the course. And we will check that and make sure the tutors have the right qualifications and that the course covers all the right areas. And we also send in an external assessor for every course that's run, wherever it may be in the world. And that's a Cambridge-appointed assessor, and they will observe some lessons. They will look at the written work of candidates, and they have an input into the quality of the course and the judgments that the local course tutors are making. Anything to add there?
No, I think spot on. It's an interesting question there. Can I work while I do a CELTA course? The answer is, I think it depends.
It depends, yeah. If you're doing a full-time course, an intensive course over 4 weeks, the answer I would say is most definitely no, because you'll find it's so rewarding and all-consuming that you won't have time for anything else during the month. However, on a part-time course, obviously it's possible to work, and most people who do part-time courses are working during the day. Yeah.
And actually it's quite interesting, if you're a teacher and you're working part-time, it means that the things that you learn on the course you can put into practice in your classes, so you're getting additional practice, aren't you really? Yeah, great. Is the online certificate as good as a face-to-face certificate? They're identical, absolutely identical.
There's some questions here about the language level of the participants, course participants. Again, we covered this on the course. Did you want to repeat it, Mary-Trace?
Yes, sure. I think Cambridge are advising C1 level, but essentially you have to have language ability to be able to deal with upper intermediate students. So you have to be able to correct the errors of upper intermediate students. You have to be able to teach language and to understand language that can be dealt with in lessons at that level. So we say really that C1 level is really the minimum, I think. C1 is, what is that, CAE?
Yes, it's a good pass at CAE. And we look at all this from the learner's point of view. So as Maitra says, we expect successful candidates to be able to help upper intermediate learners. That's the highest level you'll teach at during the course, upper intermediate learners, to improve their language. So obviously you need a higher level than that yourself if you're teaching them.
Someone asked an interesting question: how can I prepare for a CELTA course? Okay. And that's an interesting one because, well, the answer is yes and no, isn't it, David?
Yes, I mean, there's quite a bit of preparation that's recommended. Usually most centres, after the interview process, and once they've offered you a place, will provide you with the Cambridge pre-course task. And this is a comprehensive introduction, really, to English language teaching, and it's in the form of a booklet. And the answers are in the back, so it's like a self-study guide. And that will help you to sort of bring yourself up to speed in terms of methodology and in terms of language analysis. So that's the main area of preparation. It's usually around 15 to 20 hours work that you do on your own before you start a course. And then some centres provide some additional facilities like grammar primers, which will also help you to improve.
And don't forget as well Cambridge English Teacher, and there's a grammar course there on Cambridge English Teacher, which I think Pippa told you something about earlier on. And many people who are about to do CELTA course will do the grammar course, which is free, on the Cambridge English Teacher, in order to improve or revise or refresh their grammar, knowledge, which is helpful because it's less to do once the course starts. There was a question earlier, Nick? Or?
There have been lots of questions about Delta, and I think it's quite clear we probably need to do a webinar on Delta. So we'll put it on the list. But there are a number of questions about the difference between CELTA and Delta.
I think the answer really is that Delta is an MA level qualification. So the subject knowledge that you have to have at Delta is significantly higher than CELTA. CELTA is a pre-service or an initial teacher training qualification. Even though lots of people that do CELTA have experience, you don't need with CELTA vast subject knowledge. With Delta, you do.
Yeah. And if you're going to embark on a Delta, then the pre-course task for that is really quite substantial, and there's an awful lot of reading for Delta that you need to do before you start the course, and then reading during the course. And during the course, you have to provide 4 written assignments, for example, which are quite substantial in length, and they preface a very in-depth lesson, which is assessed, 3 of them internally and then 1 by an external assessor. So yeah, the Deltas are at MA level and really considerably much more in depth than the CELTA course, which,
yes,
as we said, is the initial qualification.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll do another webinar on Delta and cover a lot of those points. Someone here's got an interesting point. Someone who's completing their CELTA course in July, and they really don't want to stop learning. What's the next step? Well, the next step obviously is to start teaching, and when you start teaching, you will learn at the same time. But I'd recommend Cambridge English Teacher again as a way of continuing your professional development. There are courses online you can take on it. There attend more webinars, and then of course, in 2 or 3 years, the Delta is an appropriate qualification to take.
Yeah, and perhaps I could just add that a key part of the CELTA course is development of self-awareness as a teacher. So of course, once you start teaching, you never stop learning, and you can learn so much from observing yourself while you're teaching, and of course observing your learners.
Yeah. Good question here is of recognition. Is the certificate valid all over the world? The answer is yes, it is. It's globally recognized as a teaching qualification, and people will either state that they want people with a certificate, or if you go with a certificate, they will know what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. Our CELTA courses in other countries are as good as the one in Cambridge. The CELTA courses are good all over the world. Every single CELTA course is moderated and assessed by an external assessor, and Cambridge ensure quality is maintained throughout. Every CELTA trainer is trained by a CELTA trainer on a CELTA course, and that's how we manage to maintain the standards. So if you do a CELTA course in Cambridge or you do a CELTA course in, tell me a place beginning with a K, Connecticut. There isn't a centre in Connecticut, but another country, Calcutta, for example, you would end up with the same kind of quality teaching.
Absolutely.
Some questions here on the numbers on courses. How many numbers are there on a face-to-face course?
Well, usually the ratio is 1 tutor to every 5 or 6 candidates. So you might have a typical course with 15 candidates and 3 tutors, or 18 candidates and 3 tutors.
Or 12 candidates and 2 tutors.
Indeed.
Do non-native speakers with CELTA get hired to teach English? Of course.
Absolutely.
There are more non-native English teachers than native teachers in the world, and all over the world, many CELTA trainers, CELTA candidates are working in Eastern Europe, in South America, in Russia.
And one thing we have noticed, and this is probably a gradual change over the years, is that CELTA is no longer is taken by native English speakers all the time, and there's quite a large proportion of non-native English speakers on CELTA courses who pass and do extremely well.
Absolutely, absolutely. What else have we got? Minimum requirements for non-native English speakers, again, C1 level. So perhaps the Cambridge examination, yes. The higher end of Cambridge Advanced.
Cambridge Advanced is the right level for that.
Yeah. I've taken TKT modules. Would you advise taking CELTA 2? Absolutely. As I said before, TKT is an exam, so it tests your knowledge at a particular time. Yeah. It doesn't teach you to develop skills.
And if you're unsure about your level, apply to a centre, because the centre will always give you very honest feedback during the application process. And if they think that your level's not quite high enough for CELTA, then they'll give you advice as to what you can do instead.
Well, somebody's saying here that they didn't just take the TKT exam, they had a course as well, so bravo.
Yeah.
Can you fail a CELTA course? The answer is yes.
Yes, unfortunately some people do fail the course. The assessment criteria are very strict, and obviously it's important that the certificate is awarded to only those who meet those criteria. However, all centres have very rigorous application procedures, so centres only accept candidates who they are confident will pass the course, and the vast majority do. I think the statistics are something like 95% of people who take the course pass it, and 5% withdraw or fail. But as I say, most centres are really careful about who they take onto the courses, because it's such a big investment of time and money that it's important that only those we're confident will pass are accepted.
Lots of questions here about people who have got qualifications in English from their own universities, MAs, even PhDs. And the question is CELTA for them? I
think yes, because the thing that's often missing from a university degree, even an MA degree, is that it has they often have no practical component. So you will have your theoretical knowledge will be tested and evaluated, and so you will have your theoretical qualification, but no practical teaching assessment. And CELTA, of course, gives you that practical teaching qualification. Okay. English language level we've dealt with before.
Yeah. Is the location of the CELTA course important to employers? But the answer is no, because the CELTA certificate doesn't say where you get the qualification from. It just says it's a qualification from the University of Cambridge. So that's not information which is provided.
Okay.
I think we've probably got time for one more question.
Does the CELTA course recommend any particular set of teaching resources? Well, I think CELTA courses generally, the teachers on the courses will be using internationally recognized coursebook materials, but also during the course participants are encouraged to develop materials of their own and to adapt course books. It's part of the whole training of being a teacher.
Absolutely, yeah. And most centres will have sets of course books that they'll get you to use with the students that you'll be teaching. So all that is provided for you during the course. And there's a little bit of pre-course reading as part of the pre-course task, and there's a reading list in the Cambridge pre-course task which you'll be given once you've been offered a place on the course.
Okay, one more question I think we've got time for is, some people have been asking about, does CELTA prepare you for one-to-one teaching or ESP teaching or EAP teaching? How would you respond to that?
Well, I think the obvious focus of the CELTA is teaching adults in groups. However, if you have successfully completed a CELTA, you'll be able to teach one-to-one classes and ESP classes, English for Special Purposes. And most schools will give you some additional guidance if you have to teach those types of classes.
And the skills that you use for general English classes, those same classroom management skills and teaching techniques, you will use in different situations. So, for example, if you're teaching a business English class, you use the same methodology, but your material is different. So you'll use a business English book instead of using a general English book. So you still learn valuable teaching skills and teaching techniques.
Yeah. And again, the learner's needs are always paramount. So that's true of any teaching context.
Yes, I think we often have the young learner question as well, don't we? Of I teach young learners, so what value is the CELTA for me? And I think the same argument goes. That the same teaching techniques, many of the techniques that you use are transferable. But also, it's also possible to do the young learner extension to CELTA in many countries, which is a 2-week additional course that people who have graduated from CELTA, you have to have the CELTA in order to do the young learner extension. But many teachers go on to do the young learner extension, which is focused entirely on teaching kids.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have to wrap it up there. I'm sorry if we haven't answered your question. We did our best. That's all we have time for, but I'd like to thank you very much for attending this webinar, The Ultimate Guide to CELTA. We hope it's been useful, and we look forward to seeing you at our future webinars. Thanks and goodbye.